Hello, everybody. Welcome to Wednesday's ESPN FC Live. 3 times a week, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. ESPN FC Live, previewing whatever. And today there's plenty to talk about. Got some big games coming up this weekend, including El Clasico and the Manchester Derby. We will revisit and look ahead to both of those fixtures and plenty other things alongside Janusz Michallik. Janusz, how are you?
I am doing well. How are you, Mark?
I'm good, thank you. I was doing a little Wikipedia Google search for Atletico Aviación, which is on the front of your shirt. Very interesting, looking back to the late 30s and a little nod from you to some Spanish heritage.
Yeah, Atletico Madrid is just a cheap version of it. It's nothing official about it. So somebody just made it up and is making money off of Atletico Madrid, I think. Not me, but somebody is.
Wow, let's swiftly move on and not talk about that. We're going to have a little bit of fun in the opening spell. Now, this was a question that was put out on the social media channels on ESPN FC. You can only play under one of these managers in your prime. Now, those who responded made their decision. Janusz, who would you want to play for under those three? And tell me the strengths of each of them and why they would all have to be considered.
Look, I mean, I don't know if I can go one by one with everything, because they're all winners. I mean, obviously, you'd like to play for all of them.
But one name to start with. Who do you want to play for to start with?
I mean, Arsene Wenger would be probably the one. Maybe a little bit of bias. Had a chance to. I remember when he was in Monaco, we played against Monaco up in Monte Carlo. Watched them train a little bit because we were there a week ahead of the game, and so maybe there is some bias because at least I feel like I know him just a little bit, other than the fact that we watched and commentate his games, but a little bit up close and personal, if you will. And this was, of course, well ahead of the time that he had his best success with Arsenal Football Club. But I think the innovation that he's brought to Arsenal and Premier League in general, right? The intricacies of his coaching, different way of playing, the way of playing that I think I'd like, the combination play. And I don't even want to go into the Invincibles per se, but I mean, it's a special something special that, of course, Mourinho accomplished in many different ways. And Sir Alex Ferguson, of course, a legend himself in terms of what he's done in the Premier League. But I just think the calm mentality, I think sort of even when you're winning and losing, would probably suit me. Not a lot of drama with him, which I think in terms of my character would have been good. Sir Alex Ferguson would probably be second. Mourinho just too cynical. And although I think he gets short end of the stick because we know that he's a little bit different on the inside than he projects on the outside, you can sense it that he's a much different manager when things aren't going his way. And even though many have said that this is the way he protects his players, I don't necessarily think that's always the case with some of the clubs that he's coached. Players feel it. That fighting spirit, maybe the fighting spirit of Sir Alex Ferguson when things weren't going well, where everybody responded immediately, that would have been my second, close to Arsene Wenger. But too cynical and too much drama with Mourinho for me.
We'll get to Fergie and we'll get to Mourinho in just a second. But Arsene Wenger's 74 now. When he left Arsenal in 2018, he was 69, about to become 70 years old. So there's probably still a lot of management left in him. But after as long as he had at Arsenal, did you think he was maybe going to have a year or two out and then get back into management? And is it a shame that he's been lost to the management game?
Well, I think it's a shame. I think we all thought that perhaps, but did you not feel that? And I think the same goes for Sir Alex Ferguson. That these two guys, with the rivalry they had in particular, not that Mourinho didn't have it either, but I mean, you can sense it that there were club legends and one club managers, and I think that's what prevented Arsene Wenger and Sir Alex Ferguson. Part of it may be age. Too, but I just think they felt that they could never rebuild any club to that degree. I also think that they also truly believe that it takes time. And in this day and age, Mark, look at this. I mean, you get 4 or 5 months, Potter, and there's so many managers that you lose 5, 6, or 7 games, and everybody loses patience. And I think they were conscious of that because they knew how long it took, how much sweat they had to put into that to Manchester United and Arsenal in general. And they just felt that at their age, there's no chance they would have been given that sort of time.
Okay, Sir Alex Ferguson, I'm surprised you didn't have him as your number 1 after he won the Scottish First Division with St Mirren in 1976-77. He's my number 1, of course, even though he beat Hearts with his Aberdeen side in 85-86. Quick story, by the way, about Sir Alex Ferguson. There's a man who's sadly no longer with us called Wallace Mercer, who was the chairman of Hearts. One of his dafter ideas was to try and merge Hearts and Hibs. That didn't work. One of his brighter ideas was to approach Sir Alex Ferguson at the World Cup in Italy in 1990 and offer him the Hearts job. He turned it down. That was when, if you remember, he just won the FA Cup, Lee Martin's goal. He was struggling a little bit at Man United, and then he really kicked on. So it could have been very different, and he could have been the greatest manager of all time with Heart of Midlothian. Anyway,
it's a good thing that it didn't happen.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
It's your team.
By the way, in the David Beckham documentary on Netflix, they're talking about, Gary Neville's talking about it. They're talking about Fergie wanting kind of everybody at the club to be mini-me's, and Beckham at the start because kind of didn't really get that. But I think even we're seeing that now. Wayne Rooney was in at 6:30 in the morning on his first day at Derby County after leaving DC United, because that's what Fergie did. First in, last out. I suppose they're very different managers, aren't they? You've spoken about Mourinho and how it's probably more all about him. I thought he was a much better manager way back when he won the Champions League and won the UEFA Cup with Porto. But things have moved on. Fergie was able to adapt, wasn't he, to different scenarios over a heck of a long time.
Well, yeah, and we'll make him different and Arsene Wenger to a large degree, because I don't think Jose Mourinho ever had that. Was the total control of the club, and that's unusual. That has changed also, not just the players, not just the times, but the way they ran that club. Right, everybody understood when they walked in early in the morning, not just the players, but the backroom staff and everybody involved in the training ground knew exactly that the boss was in. It wasn't just figurative to say the boss was in. So I think they understood what it takes to get the club. But I think that was maybe sign of the times, and maybe another reason why Sir Alex Ferguson and Arsene Wenger in particular never took another job.
Okay, let's talk El Clasico now. It's the first one of the season this weekend. Saturday, if you're in the United States, 10:15 Eastern on ESPN+, but from 9 o'clock Eastern on ESPN2 and ESPN+, the ESPN FC build-up and the pre-game show. And if you want to scan the QR code, if you're not already a subscriber to ESPN+, you'll be able to do so using that QR code. Now, I'm going to take you back 12 months. I was lucky enough to be in Spain, Janusz, during España week and went to the Clasico, the first one, at the Bernabeu that Real Madrid won by 3-2. The gulf in class, even during that game and subsequent weeks, you kind of thought, how many are Real Madrid going to win this title by? But look what happened. They didn't. Barcelona did. So how much importance are you putting on this first Clasico of the season on Saturday?
No, it's early. I don't think it's the same as it used to be. I mean, it's always tight races, so I always put importance on it, because we all know that if they're tied, these El Clasicos make a difference, the head-to-head. So of course it is important. It sets the rest of the season. It gives you a good vibe, in particular for both teams this season, because both Barcelona and Real Madrid are in the Champions League as well. Last season, of course, Barcelona were not. So I think it is important because it's the biggest rivalry. I mean, that's what everybody cares about. I want to say more around the world, the casual fans than maybe there, because I think there are many great clubs, and look at what Atleti are doing, to maybe surprise of many, the way they've started the season, how they're playing, and all that. And obviously within Spain, not everybody cares about that, but it is El Clasico. It is important for La Liga, as we know, around the world, because it's probably arguably the most watched derby in the world these days. I haven't checked stats, but it's got to be up there, if not first, maybe second. So it is important from that standpoint. But I think this season is also important because I'll tell you this, even though they're both rebuilding, it's easy to say that Real Madrid are always one of the favorites to win it. but probably you wouldn't say that about Barcelona ahead of the season. And maybe not at this moment, speaking today, what we're going to see today against Shakhtar Donetsk, 6 academy players and all of that. But I think if I look at two teams, I just had to look at Barcelona because I've forgotten who they have because everybody's been injured for the most part. I think when you put the best starting line from Barcelona, they're as good as any. If they were healthy in the latter stages of the Champions League and La Liga, of course, I'll tell you, I think they would be one of my favorites because I think they're much better, much more talented than many give them credit for.
Yeah, the injuries you mentioned that. I mean, they're hoping to have Lewandowski available for selection this weekend and a couple of others as well, which would certainly help them. They've not been brilliant, but they've not had to be. They've found a way to get results, whether it's coming back from 2 goals down, whether it's the game against Sevilla, even the game at the weekend against Athletic Club when Mark Hugh came on and scored within 23 seconds. So they're unbeaten. They're the only team in La Liga who is still unbeaten. But them at their best or Real Madrid at their best, who's the better team, Janusz?
I think maybe slightly still it looks like Real Madrid, but as I said, I'll take Barcelona if everybody's healthy. I really would. World-class goalkeeper, something that Real Madrid does have, but not for a long time now. In Thibaut, but Ter Stegen absolutely outstanding. And even if they're both playing, take your pick really. That's how important good Ter Stegen has been. The back four of Barcelona, I think, is very, very good, especially with João Cancelo there. Ball down the left-hand side. My goodness. I mean, still young, but what a player. One of the best out there, hands down. I think if you have Araujo and Koundé, love it. If Christensen comes in for one of them, that's quality and experience in all competitions from him. Inigo Martinez obviously had some injuries, and he's going to be playing right now, but he's not the one to come in. But, that back four with the goalkeeper alone. And then, the funny thing about all these injuries is that a lot of young players get an opportunity and get tons of experience. So that contributes very much so in the terms of depth. And Lewandowski's Lewandowski. You look at Rafinha, who's going to be back. Gavi's suspended for the Champions League. Pedri's almost there. Frankie de Jong's been outstanding. Gundogan. I don't know now that I'm saying it, I don't know if I give it to Real Madrid, but slightly I think I would.
Back in the day when you had the Figos and the Zidanes and the Rivaldos and the Ronaldos, I mean, some of the Clásicos were just ridiculous. They were so good. But a lot of those were from players that were brought to the football club. And when you see youngsters like Vinny Jr. on one side and Rodrigo, and you've got Lamine Yamal and Marc Gui that came on at the weekend and scored that goal against Athletic Club, could we be seeing maybe us getting back to those days of the fantastic fixtures that were must-watch, but instead, a lot of them made up by homegrown players at Real Madrid and Barca?
It's going to take time. Okay. Not anytime soon. No, because, I mean, for the rivalry to be special, I mean, there's so many derbies, and yet, I was just watching Liverpool-Everton. I mean, what derby? I mean, it isn't a derby, right? It's one big club and a big club, but it hasn't been big on the pitch for a long time, right? And you can go on and on and on. And, what we had back then, I don't know if it can be replicated ever, to be quite honest. Maybe in time, who knows? But, it wasn't just the players, but it was Mourinho and Pep. They didn't like each other at that time. I don't know if they like each other now, but I think in England, it looked a little bit different. Messi against Ronaldo, 2 of the best ever. I mean, but let's go back, the other Ronaldo. I mean, if you go back the Figos, as you've mentioned, Ronaldinho. I mean, Ronaldinho had the work ethic of some of the best. Say Cristiano Ronaldo. I mean, come on. I mean, he's more explosive than Messi was in so many ways, right? So I remember some of those matches, but I just think we're not there yet. You need personalities on and off the pitch, and maybe if Kylian Mbappe comes in, and maybe if Erling Haaland say he goes to Barcelona, I don't know if that's possible, but those two going against each other. You have Bellingham, maybe Musiala comes in, and those two, very, very talented players get to that level. But you'd be hard pressed, even if they get to their ceiling, to think that we're going to have players anytime soon, seeing what I see right now, not just with these two clubs, but possibilities of other players coming in. I still think it's a stretch.
What's your prediction for Saturday?
My prediction is 1-1, and that's not just sitting on the fence. But again, we'll have to see what Barcelona, if Lewandowski does recover. It looks like he may play. Rafinha is very close, even Frankie de Jong, I think, although he's the furthest away, from at least from what I read. So those are big losses, and we're talking about Real Madrid, who was able to rest Tchouaméni, Alba, Toni Kroos, and who have a midfield that's still being built, but I mean, they have 6 options right now in the center of the pitch. You know, even Modric, who played excellently the other day in the Champions League. So I think that tips it still with Vinny Jr., Rodrigo, Bellingham in such form. You have to say that on paper, Real Madrid have to be favored. Well, slight favors, but I think Barcelona would at least get a draw out of it.
I think you've covered every single base, and you can say to me next week, "Told you so," and you're like, "Yeah, well, you mentioned everything."
You know, okay, because we don't like draws, right?
I want to move on. We don't. I want to move. Hey, look, not one result would surprise you.
No.
Barca win it, Real Madrid win it, if it's a draw, there will not be a surprising result.
Having said so much about Barca, with everything that's going on, with still injuries, by the way, you know, Real Madrid does have them as well. It's not an excuse. But since I've been talking about Barcelona, let me go to Barcelona 1-0. If it was at the Camp Nou, I would have said it for sure. In Montjuic, though, I mean, there's 6 games, 6 wins, though, right? But it still doesn't have the feel the same. But let's go Barcelona 1-0. And, yeah, you can say all you want in the chat about it. If you're Real Madrid fans, I love you. You've been great, but I'm going to give it to Barcelona.
Right, that's a yellow card, not just yellow highlighting that we're going to move on to the Manchester derby. You've just given me 2 possible outcomes out of 3. So.
No, Barcelona. I would, because nobody.
Move on.
Nobody likes to sit on the fence, so no longer a draw.
Let me move on. Luis Miguel Echegaray, one of the most patient guys, because he's having to be finally. You're talking about derbies and meaningful derbies. You've spoken, Janusz, a lot about Barcelona and Real Madrid, Manchester derby. Luis Miguel. What about it this weekend? Who's the favourites? That's a stupid question. It's Manchester City. However, what kind of game are you expecting this weekend in the Manchester derby, the first one of the season?
That's a good question, MD. And as you rightly said, Manchester City is clearly the favourite in this game. It's not just because of who they are as a squad under Pep Guardiola, as we already know, the treble winners coming in the first derby against Manchester, but it's also about everything that's going on with Manchester United, including, of course, the poignant, tragic, beautiful, emotional tribute that they played to the late Sir Bobby Charlton, specifically on Tuesday night. There's a lot going on with Manchester United, emotionally, financially, from a squad perspective. And when a derby comes to play, and Janusz was correct in saying that, you know, the gravitas of certain derbies, like the Merseyside one, is not as big as it used to be. And you could say that within the Manchester derby, that's the case as well. But I spent time in Manchester. A big piece has come out now of how I've explored that city, thanks to the voices of United and City fans. And it's very different, obviously. City fans feel confident, energetic, and optimistic about what's to come and what's already come. And United fans, obviously, with the biggest clear sign, we want the Glazers out. So there's a lot going on. So to answer your question, I think it's going to be a tricky one, a gritty one, but in the end, skill and talent will override anything, and I think City will take care of it.
City for you, Janusz, or are you going to take every result and say you were right?
You took so much time away with the heart story that I have to be.
Don't
quick.
You dare! Honestly, you think that someone else has spoken too much?
I can't believe you just said that. And I'm only here for 2 minutes, Matt.
I mean, you know, I think people
irony of ironies.
Real Madrid, not about hearts, but you know, maybe I'm in minority here, but yeah, I mean, City, of course. I mean, you look at Manchester United. I mean, as average as they come. There's no fear factor whatsoever when it comes to a massive club like Manchester United. That's a problem. But it is an issue. I mean, you look at it at a team that's playing badly, yet They've won 3 straight games in the competition. In the Premier League, as bad as they have been and as good as we think Manchester City are, I mean, United is 5 points away from Champions League spots. So, I mean, it's not all that bad. And it just makes you wonder that one of those games, and this is one of them, that they did it last season, right? So who's to say? But it doesn't look that way, because even with that occasion that Lewis was talking about, and that's important, with Bobby Charlton, that wasn't enough to fire this team. I mean, the first 45 minutes was horrendous against a club like Copenhagen that could have scored 2, maybe 3 goals in that first half. But City have to be favorites, has to be theirs.
Okay, we spoke earlier, Luis Miguel, about which manager that you would take or you would want to play for, Sir Alex Ferguson, Jose Mourinho, or Arsene Wenger. We're going to tweak that slightly and give you an X or a Y. Who was better in their prime? Talking about Manchester derbies, Sergio Aguero at his prime or Wayne Rooney at his prime. You can start one, but you have to bench the other. Who are you starting?
You know what? Our producer, Rob Moore, is loving this because this is going to be a great hit from a social perspective. Lots of comments and arguments in this one, right? All right, let's begin with the facts, okay? Let's begin with Wayne Rooney. 208 goals and 103 assists in 491 Premier League appearances. Sergio Aguero, 275 Premier League appearances, 184 goals, making it with 47 assists. City's current record score, of course. Rooney and Aguero both won 5 Premier League titles. Obviously, Rooney won the Champions League as well, the Europa League with United, whereas Aguero became the Golden Boot winner in 2014, 2015. I'm sorry, when was it? Yeah, that's right. And then but Rooney won Player of the Season in 2009, 2010. Here's what I'm going to say. Sergio Aguero, to me, is the better finisher, the better striker. Wayne Rooney was probably the better all-round player. So really the answer is whoever you want to start or you want to bench. It depends on what team you have behind you. So to me, Sergio Aguero is possibly the greatest South American striker that entered the Premier League, maybe even international behind Thierry Henry. So if I'm looking for goals, which is ultimately the most important thing in this game, I'm going with Sergio Aguero, I think.
Okay, you with Aguero or are you Team Rooney, Janusz?
I'm on Team Rooney, and that's unusual for me to say because I would usually pick players with a flair like this. Look, I mean, I always look at the game also from the standpoint that things don't always go your way. It's not always great. There are games that you struggle in, and I think, as Lewis has said, in terms of scoring goals, they're both fairly close, right? And but what Rooney gives you is that explosiveness and that extra spark when you struggle, right? He'll give you that extra tackle in the midfield and then go on a 30, 40-yard explosive run and can maybe do something by himself. I'm not saying that Aguero couldn't, but not in the same way. Same with, that maybe 30, 40, not 40, but 25, 30-yard strike, that special one, which I think Rooney has shown that he can do as well. So I just think that, when you talk about 2 great players and there's very little to separate them, then you go to something extra. And I think, Lewis, maybe you hinted at that all around, right? Because how do you separate them both? They would both give you what you want because they were both great goal scorers. But then what's next? And I just think that for me, being a player, I just think that, that look on the face of Aguero, that just the grind, the sometimes just can take you on your back and, could go on a counter all by himself and create something out of nothing. And that's why, if I had to separate slightly, I go Rooney's way.
As far as the fixture itself is concerned, Luis Miguel, one of the comments down below has just said that Wayne Rooney embodied what the Manchester derby was all about, left nothing out there. Is it still as intense, do you think, as it was when Wayne Rooney played? Or in your opinion, with Manchester City's ability right now and what they're capable of, can that intensity still exist with the way, as Janusz and yourself were talking about, that Manchester City have played this season, especially that first half against Copenhagen?
Yeah, it's a good question. I guess it depends on the definition of intensity, right? Because obviously, from an emotional perspective and the fact that they're both local rivals, there's going to be that intensity. But the clear gap of where they are has to come into play when you talk about a derby, and you have to give it to Manchester City almost every time. It's an anomaly, I think, at this point, if Manchester United really takes over. I mean, you know, but I go back to January 2023, earlier this year, right? United won that game 2-1. So it does happen. But prior to that game, City won 6-3. The last one was the FA Cup Man City win against United. So it does happen. And obviously emotions come into play. And it can be intense. And I agree with the commenter, Wayne Rooney. And again, echoing what Janusz said, like Wayne Rooney was he was like a boxer playing football. He just wanted to give everything. And I think that's what you love to see in derby. So he embodied it. But that's not to not take away Man City players. I mean, if you watch Yaya Toure highlights in a Manchester derby, you can also see that from the City side. So, but this is a big game and it's important. And again, as Janusz said, like we're still early enough in the season where Manchester United can really take these 3 points and make it something. And I know we're going to talk about him in a second, but I'm looking for somebody like Marcus Rashford to really just go at this weekend, right? If Wayne Rooney embodied the Manchester United persona, we need like a local boy, somebody that's just represented his national team, somebody to really go out there, you know, to help the likes of Bruno Fernandes and the 20-year-old Hojlund up front. So we'll see what happens, but it can be intense. It really needs both of them to really go at it.
Janusz, where's the Marcus Rashford from last season gone?
Yeah, we're all looking for him, right? Yeah, as I said, I mean, the problem I have, you know, it's easy to say it's the consistency, but I think it's just the mentality. There's a softness in there that Erik ten Hag, who's not a soft manager himself, has to find. And that's on him. I mean, we've been complimentary of Erik ten Hag for a long time, but now is the time where we can have a go. Just like any manager, you have to make your players better. It's not necessarily in terms of skill, because he does have that, but he has to light a fire under Rashford, because he needs to play all the time, not just when things go his way. And, you know, we've been talking about it for a couple of days on our show about that it seems to me that if the environment is perfect for Marcus Rashford, then he plays well. We saw that last season when things were going well. When they're not, he doesn't. And again, you can compare that to Wayne Rooney, right? Because there was, no matter what the environment, he played the same way. So I think this is what you need from him. I wouldn't necessarily give up on him just yet, but I think it's Ten Hag's job to challenge him. And if he doesn't answer that challenge, don't let him mope. Put him on the bench.
And maybe a game like Manchester City can bring out the best in Marcus Rashford, and whether he is or isn't among the goals, someone that United fans, Luis Miguel, are looking to get among the goals is Rasmus Hojlund. 20 years old, 64 million he cost, 64 million pounds. He was injured at the start. Do you think it'll come good from him sooner rather than later, or might we still have to wait a little bit before we see him at his best?
We might have to wait a little bit, maybe even a whole season, MD, because like you said, he's 20 years old and the team itself is not necessarily giving him what he wants. I mean, you mentioned the numbers and the price that they paid, and unfortunately, that already sets a pressure on the young striker. No goals in the Premier League right now, right? And it's nearly November. Granted, like you said, he was injured at the beginning, but then I start to think, you know, certain expectations come to age, and what would have happened if United maybe paid more attention to other strikers like Kolo Muani or Osimhen or Lautaro Martinez or even Santiago Jimenez, who maybe would have costed less than this player right now. I think it's okay to be patient with him, but I wouldn't necessarily expect him to really get out of it until maybe even next season. I mean, look at Darwin Núñez and Julian Alvarez. It still took them a little bit, so I'm sure it's going to be the same with him.
Okay, I'm going to see how quickly I can wrap this up. Knowing that you both like a story, and as do I, I'm going to give you a task here. I simply want a score line, and if it's going in favour of one of the two teams in the Manchester derby, who that's for. Nothing else. Janusz Michallik, go.
I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell you a story about this Polish team that used to play in Scotland, if you don't mind. 3-1 Manchester City.
Okay, Luis Miguel. Listen. One score, one team.
3-1 Man City. 3-1 Man City too.
You're both agreeing. Come on.
Yes.
Let him speak. Don't interrupt him. You're taking time away from him.
The irony overload is magnificent.
It's ridiculous.
Thank you to Luis Miguel. Thank you to Janusz and his tall tales. We will do this all again on Friday. I'm looking forward to it. ESPN FC Live, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and ESPN FC every single day on ESPN+.
Bye, Luis. It was a pleasure chatting with you.
Bye.
Bye.